many of you remember the story of the DC snipers? They were also called the Beltway snipers. Well, if you don't, back in 2002, 2 men killed 17 people and critically injured 10 more over a 3-week period, the majority of which happened in the Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland Beltway there, right up and down Interstate 95. It was a huge story that had the country in a panic. No one knew where the next shot was going to come from or when it was going to come. I'm sure a lot of you probably vaguely remember it. If you're from the United States, I don't know if the story made it internationally or not. Well, first, I am not in Washington, D.C. or Virginia or Maryland. I'm actually at work at Garrett Coliseum today. Even still, I'm still going to tell this story because very few people actually know this, but just days prior to the horrific sniper attacks there on the DC Beltway, they claimed several other victims on their way there, one of whom, and probably one of the most important ones, happened right here in my hometown of Montgomery, Alabama. So today I am going to talk about the horrific murders that were committed by the DC snipers, or the Beltway snipers, John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo. I'm going to talk about all of them, even though I'm not in the DC area. But I'm also going to head over to the location here in Montgomery where they shot 2 local residents of my hometown, killing one of them and wounding the other one. As you can see, especially if you watch my last one, I'm starting this video out at Garrett Coliseum. That's because I have to work for part of the day. In that monster truck video, I explained what I do here and the details of my job. I'm not really here to talk about this show today. It just so happens that I'm starting this video out though while I'm here. Today they're actually having a cheerleading tournament, which actually started at the butt crack of dawn this morning. That's why I'm gonna have most of the day to travel around and film this video, because we did start this so early this morning. Compared to all the dirt that filled this arena just a few days ago for the monster truck show, they've got it completely cleaned out. Probably had to sweep it all up, and we're ready for today's cheerleading competition. They got them going on both sides. One could hope, since I had to be here so early this morning, that it would have been older cheerleaders, and it's not. It's high school and below. But nevertheless, I'm going to start telling you the story while I'm here, and then I'll move on to the location here in Montgomery where the story is going to be relevant to here.
It was a terrifying situation for thousands of people. Gunmen in the neighborhood killing individuals in a methodical way. People were too frightened to go outside. It happened again and again and again.
It was right after New Year's in 2002 when 41-year-old John Allen Muhammad and 17-year-old Lee Boyd Malvo, they made a decision that would alter their lives and the lives of 27 other people forever. You see, John Muhammad had made the decision that he wanted to take the life of his ex-wife because she was keeping his kids from him. He wanted to take her life, but he was smart enough to know that if she come up murdered, that he was going to be a top suspect. So after talking to and enrolling the 17-year-old Malvo, they thought of a way around it. They would make it appear as if she were killed at random by a mass murderer. How they expected to pull it off and to actually get away with it, I don't know. No one knows. They never said. But the ultimate goal of all of those people dying and all the people getting hurt was only to kill his ex-wife, which incidentally never happened, actually. So after devising their plan to murder Muhammad's ex-wife, they needed weapons to pull it off. So in the local Tacoma, Washington area, they committed several burglaries where they knew the owners had firearms. They ultimately stole several rifles and several handguns from those robberies. The two men loaded up into John Muhammad's 1990 Chevy Caprice and then started a crime/death spree across the country. On February the 16th of 2002, Malvo shot and killed a woman named Kenya Cook. She was Muhammad's ex-wife's best friend and had encouraged Mildred to leave, actually. So they went after her first. Immediately, they left Tacoma. There was no turning back. So they made their way down to Tucson, Arizona, and actually stayed with Muhammad's sister for some time. Unfortunately, Muhammad's sister lived right next door to a golf course. So when they got ready to move on, they took the life of a golfer named Jerry Taylor. From this point, they funded this cross-country trip by committing armed robberies and murders all the way across the country, from one end to the other. They murdered and robbed Paul LaRuffa, who was a pizzeria owner. The same with a gentleman named Million Walden Merriam, who was a package store employee in Atlanta, Georgia. And Hong Ballinger, who was the owner of a Chinese takeout restaurant. All three were not only shot, but they took all of their money. Later, the same day, after they committed another armed robbery at another liquor store, Muhammad and Malvo hit I-85, which brought them right here through Montgomery, Alabama. They exited I-85 to Zelda Road, which coincidentally is right here, the same direction we are heading now. They exited the interstate just looking for somewhere to rob so they could make some extra cash, when they immediately ran across this ABC store that's right here behind me. They entered this, it's a liquor store, it's an Alabama state-owned liquor store. They entered this ABC store with the sole purpose to rob it and take the money. As soon as they walked through the door right there, they immediately opened fire, killing an employee named Claudine Parker and critically wounding another employee named Kelly Adams. Kelly Adams got shot in her neck and somehow managed to survive it. They made off with as much cash as they could carry out of the store, and it all went down right there, right here in this same exact spot. It was still an ABC store in 2002. It looked a little bit different. They had a little different logo up here where it says Select ABC Spirits. It was a little different logo, but nevertheless, still an ABC store. So after robbing this ABC store here, they finished out the rest of their journey. They drove back up the road here, got right back on I-85, and began heading northeast until they made it to their destination. Once the men arrived in D.C., they went to Mildred's neighborhood. Mildred, again, was Muhammad's ex-wife. They went to her neighborhood hoping to take her life. They just never quite crossed paths. So basically they just drove around the beltway there and shot and killed random people. There was no method to their madness. It had nothing to do with race or age or sex or anything. They just began shooting anybody they could. Very quickly after they got there, they committed several murders in a quick succession. They shot and killed James Buchanan, who was out front of his own home cutting his grass as they happened to drive by. Another gentleman by the name of James Martin, who was loading his groceries in the back of his car out front of the grocery store.
911 emergency.
Hi, I'm at Shoppers for Warehouse on Randolph Road, and some man just on the parking lot. There was a loud noise. I'm not sure if he was shot or not.
Prem Kumar Walker, he was pumping gas at a Shell gas station. Sarah Ramos, she was actually sitting on a bus bench as they drove by, waiting on a bus. And Pascal Charlotte, who was walking home as they drove by. Now, they weren't your typical drive-by shootings, okay? What they had done is they had cut a hole out in the back of Muhammad's Caprice, right above the license plate. It was a big enough hole where they could have the barrel of the gun and still be able to see out of the scope. So as they drove by, one of them would be laid down in the back of the car, into the trunk, having the gun up to that hole, and they would fire, striking their targets just as they drove down the street randomly. After the first set of murders, the police started putting pieces together. They started matching up shell casings that were found on the streets. And then as information started coming out to the public, a fear blanketed not only just the DC area, but the entire United States. No one knew when or where the next shot would be fired. So the Washington, D.C. Police Department had a press conference, and they released a statement telling everyone to keep all of your children indoors. Schools went on lockdown at all times. They had no more outside recess or PE. It was a very troubling time for America. You couldn't go anywhere. You were scared for your life. Right after the police made that statement, another series of attacks took place. Carolyn Sewell was shot outside of a Michael's department store. Iran Brown, he was 13 years old, and he was walking into his middle school, and they were sitting there waiting. But it was there at that Iran Brown shooting, they recovered several shell casings, and they also recovered a tarot card. It was the death card, and on the back of it, the snipers had inscribed like 3 different sentences. The top line said, "For you, Mr. Police," and then right below it, it said, "Call me God." And then right below that at the bottom, it said, "Do not release to the media." Nevertheless, more attacks took place. Dean Myers was shot while he was pumping gas there on the Beltway. Kenneth Bridges was also shot while pumping gas. Linda Franklin was shot in the Home Depot parking lot under the covered part where you pull under to load your car. They got her all under it. And Jeffrey Hopper was shot exiting a steakhouse where he had just got done eating dinner with his family. Noticing a trend, gas stations all across the DC area started wrapping their property in tarp so that you couldn't see who was in there pumping gas. You couldn't see who was out of their car pumping gas. Then a school bus driver named Conrad Johnson was shot as he stepped up on the steps to get into his bus. They shot and killed him.
Brother been shot at Aspen Hill.
Aspen Hill and what?
Right here by the post office. Please, he's been shot about 2 minutes. He's been laying here, sir. Please hurry up. I'm scared. Please send some help. I'm on the bus.
And at that crime scene, there was a letter left behind. The letter said, "Your children are not safe anymore." It was right then and there the police knew that they had to put a stop to this, or else children were going to start being harmed. By the time that shooting had taken place, though, the police had been investigating all of it quite a bit. At the same time, Muhammad and Malvo, they were taunting the police and the media. They were calling them and telling them that no one was safe. And one of those conversations that they were having with the media, the snipers boasted about a murder that took place here in Montgomery, Alabama. At the time, it was still unsolved, but they were talking about the robbery of this local Montgomery, Alabama ABC store that we already talked about. That's right here behind me. That led the city of Montgomery detectives to get linked up with detectives in Virginia who were trying to solve the case, who were trying to stop the mass murders. They were able to compare the ballistics from the shell casings used here in the ABC store to the murders that were committed up there in Virginia. And as soon as they got the comparison back, Muhammad and Malvo were officially linked to this crime. At the time, the city of Montgomery had no leads, no clue who had shot and killed one of the workers of the ABC store and seriously wounded another. They had no clue until that moment. Fortunately for the police, though, they left more than shell casings in the store. So as the city of Montgomery and Virginia detectives are sharing and communicating, the Montgomery Police Department revealed to them that they had lifted a fingerprint left behind at this ABC store robbery. That fingerprint was shared with the investigators in Virginia, and they put it through a nationwide database. And voila, they got a match. They knew one of the suspects because of the fingerprint they lifted out of this ABC store. Police in Tacoma, Washington were then dispatched to Malvo's home, where they found more shell casings where he had been doing target practice before they left and hit the road. They knew they had their man, so they immediately started running Malvo's known associates. Well, they ran all of Malvo's associates' fingerprints against fingerprints that they had recovered from crime scenes. Lo and behold, from the middle school where Iran Brown was shot, one of Malvo's known associates, John Muhammad, his fingerprint came back a positive match. They now knew both of the DC snipers. They immediately dug into their computers and started investigating and quickly found out that John Muhammad owned a blue 1990 Caprice. On October the 24th of 2002, at 3:15 a.m., by sheer luck, police officers ran across that 1990 Caprice at a truck stop just across the Maryland border. It didn't take very long, and SWAT team was approaching the car, and SWAT found Malvo and Muhammad both inside of the car sleeping. They gave up without a fight, never ending the life of his ex-wife, which is what this whole thing was for. And finally, the deadly 3-week massacre that those two men went on, it was finally over. To think that they were basically captured all because one of them left a fingerprint at an ABC store they robbed here in Montgomery, Alabama. That was the catalyst to their downfall. In 2003, John Allen Muhammad was tried and sentenced to death by the state of Virginia. At the same time, Lee Boyd Malvo was tried and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without parole. So John Allen Muhammad, in 2009, his sentence was upheld and he was executed by the state of Virginia by lethal injection. So Malvo is currently serving his time in a Virginia prison.
I mean, I was a monster. If you look up the definition, I mean, that's what a monster is. I was a ghoul. I was a thief. I stole people's lives.
Finally, almost exactly 10 years after the Beltway sniper attacks, Lee Boyd Malvo finally told investigators what they had suspected all along, that John Muhammad had sexually abused him for as long as they had known each other, prior to the sniper attacks and during. Pretty much that is the story of the DC or Beltway snipers. I know that it was probably very little known that they had killed several other people, and one of them was right here in my hometown, right here in Montgomery. So now you know, it's a tough story, and I hate it for everyone who lost their lives in this selfish game that they were playing just because he was mad at his ex-wife for taking his children. That's going to do it for the story here on the DC Snipers. I want to thank you all for watching. You guys just don't know how much it means to me that you watch these videos. As always, if you are interested in supporting the channel, check out the links down in the description box below. Not only is it a huge help, but it helps keep us going, and it helps us take bigger and better trips far away from home. So thank you all so much. I'll see you again tomorrow, and I hope you all have a great day. The temperatures are dropping down below freezing here. I don't know what it's like where you are in your part of the world, but please stay safe and stay warm.